You're calling your mom? Special Forces? That's cute. The words didn't just echo. They slashed through the precinct lobby like broken glass. Officer O'Rourke leaned back in his chair, boots planted wide on the tiled floor, posture dripping with smug authority. His badge glinted under the sterile fluorescent lights, but it wasn't the shine that caught attention, it was the curl of his lip, the calculated smirk meant to draw laughter from the younger officers lingering nearby. And it worked. A couple of them chuckled, low and ugly, like hyenas circling a cornered prey. Across the counter stood Amara Cross, 17, hoodie damp from the rain, sneakers leaving faint prints on the linoleum. She wasn't trembling, though every eye tried to force her small. She held her backpack tight against her chest, the straps frayed, one zipper bent sideways. On the table beside her sat a robotics trophy, its metal chipped from years of carrying, its reflection warped by the harsh lighting. She had only come to do the right thing, return a lost iPhone she'd found outside the community center. But in this room, her honesty was nothing. To them, she was just another black girl spinning a story. "You hear that?" O'Rourke called out to the desk sergeant, tone loud enough for the clerks in the back to turn their heads. "Her mom's Special Forces. Might as well say astronaut, huh?" A ripple of laughter. One officer muttered, "Maybe she saw it on TikTok." Another leaned forward, pretending to jot down notes, voice dripping sarcasm. "Suspect claims her mother's Rambo." Amara's face remained still. No flinch, no raised voice. Just that piercing steadiness that made the insults clang hollow against her silence. And yet the air was heavy. This wasn't a joke. This was profiling dressed as humor. This was power flexed in public, daring her to fold. O'Rourke pressed the phone flat on the counter, eyes narrowing. "Look, sweetheart, we don't play games here. Phones don't just fall into your hands. Either you stole it or someone gave it to you. Which is it?" She looked down briefly, then back up, her voice quiet but carrying, "Run my name." The words sliced the laughter in half. For a second, no one moved. A junior intern by the console, Jules, a skinny IT trainee adjusting the bodycam servers, shifted uncomfortably. He glanced at Amara, then at the officers, his hand hovering near the keyboard. He saw what was happening, but saying something would cost him. O'Rourke sneered, filling the silence. "Run your name? Sure. Right after we run you out of here." He reached for the trophy, tapping its edge with his knuckle, eyes taunting. "This yours? Don't look like something you won." The smirk widened, the lobby tightened, and in that instant, Amara tightened her grip on the strap of her backpack. Every insult absorbed, but none returned. She didn't know it yet, but the storm had already begun. The precinct lobby hummed with routine. Phones rang. A copier groaned in the corner. Somewhere deep in the halls, a door slammed shut. But in the front, under the unforgiving fluorescent glare, Amara Cross stood like an uninvited guest at her own story. 17 years old, no makeup, no polished shoes, no jewelry to signal wealth or protection. Just a rain-soaked hoodie, sleeves pulled over her wrists, and a backpack older than her high school. To the officers behind the desk, she blended perfectly into the script they carried in their heads. "Poor kid, up to no good, wasting our time." What they couldn't see, not in her posture, not in her quiet, was the weight of her lineage. Her mother, Dr. Maya Cross, wasn't just a decorated Special Forces veteran. She was now the CEO of Aegis Dynamics, the defense tech company whose software powered the very body cams clipped to these officers' uniforms, whose encrypted servers stored every chain of custody report this precinct filed. But in this moment, all of that power was invisible, hidden in plain sight. Amara didn't flaunt it. She never did. Growing up, her mother taught her that silence could be heavier than thunder. "They expect you to fight, fire with fire," Maya would say. "Instead, fight with stone, unmoving, unbreakable." So Amara stood there, letting their laughter bounce against her calm. "I just came to return the phone," she said, her voice measured, carrying farther than she intended. "That's it." "Return it?" O'Rourke chuckled, turning the iPhone over in his palm like he'd already claimed it as evidence or a souvenir. "Yeah, and I'm Santa Claus. Tell me, you swiped this from a locker room, or maybe out of someone's car?" Amara's jaw tightened, but her gaze didn't waver. She gestured to the trophy resting on the counter, its base still wet from the rain. "I was leaving robotics practice. Found it in the lot." The sergeant, Hall, finally stepped closer, his expression carved from suspicion. "Robotics?" His tone held no curiosity, only derision. "What is this, a science fair prize?" A low laugh bubbled from another desk. Someone muttered, "Nerd hustle. Classic." The words stung, but Amara kept still. Silence wasn't weakness. It was a stage being built, brick by brick, and she knew who would eventually walk onto it. Jules, the IT intern at the corner console, risked another glance. He recognized the trophy's logo, State Robotics League. He knew what that meant, but he kept his head down, fingers frozen above the keyboard. His badge said temporary. His courage felt the same. O'Rourke leaned back again, chewing the inside of his cheek like he'd already won. "Tell you what, kid, we'll hold on to this phone. And that little story of yours, we'll file it under fiction." He pushed the iPhone into a drawer with an audible snap. The sound carried across the lobby, louder than it should have been, final as a lock sliding shut. The chuckles returned. The smirk stayed. And Amara, still standing there, still calm, let the silence gather around her like armor. She wasn't here to prove herself to them. She was here to watch them expose themselves. And the longer they underestimated her, the more devastating the truth would be when it finally arrived. The phone was gone now, swallowed into a drawer that clicked shut like a verdict. The sound carried, sharp and metallic, over the hum of printers and the shuffle of papers. Amara didn't move. Her backpack strap dug into her shoulder, but she held her ground. Silence, steady as stone. "Hull," O'Rourke barked, his voice filling the lobby. "We've got a situation. Possible theft." The sergeant emerged from a side door, bulkier, older, with a face carved by years of command. His eyes scanned Amara once, then landed on the trophy with suspicion. "What's this?" O'Rourke's smirk widened. "She says robotics. Found a phone in the lot. Wants us to believe she was just being a good Samaritan." A short laugh spilled from someone at the back. Another officer whispered, "Sure, that's a new hustle." Hall crossed his arms. "Kids like you don't just stumble across iPhones. Detain her. We'll sort it later." The words fell like a gavel. Detain. The first real threat. The clerk at the intake desk reached for a form. Another officer adjusted his belt, as if expecting resistance. The air in the lobby shifted no longer casual mockery, but preparation for escalation. Amara stayed still. She had learned that movement, any sudden defense, was often twisted into aggression. She heard her mother's voice in memory, calm and steel. "Stillness is power. Let them reveal themselves." She spoke, even quieter than before. "Run my name, please." Hall frowned. "Not how this works. You don't make demands here." O'Rourke leaned forward, elbows on the desk, his grin theatrical now, designed for the small audience gathering. "Oh, this is rich. She really thinks she gets a say." He tilted his head, mocking sympathy. "Your mom's special forces? What is she, viral on TikTok? Maybe trending on Reels?" A ripple of laughter burst from two younger officers near the vending machine. The sound wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than shouting. O'Rourke picked up the robotics trophy again, spinning it in his hands as if it were evidence of guilt. The edge scraped against the counter with a faint metallic whine. "Robotics, huh? Looks like plastic. Bet you bought it at a thrift shop." The smirk became a sneer. He let the trophy clatter down, louder than necessary. The sound echoed like disrespect carved into metal. Amara blinked once. No more. Her hands stayed at her sides. Her breathing stayed even. Jules, the IT intern, froze by the console. His screen lit up with body cam feeds, all synced, all recording, but only he knew how fragile the system really was. His stomach knotted. He knew this wasn't just another bad encounter. This was the kind of moment that later exploded on social feeds, the kind that left careers in ashes. He glanced at Amara, at the calm in her eyes. Something about it told him. She isn't powerless. Still, he stayed quiet. His badge said temporary. His voice, if he used it, might be too. Back at the counter, O'Rourke leaned close enough for Amara to feel his breath. "Here's how this goes. You sit down. You wait. And maybe, we don't charge you with obstruction." "Oh." Hall nodded once, signaling agreement. "Hold her until juvenile officer arrives." The order was clear. The mockery was over. Now came the machinery of authority grinding into motion. And Amara, still as stone, let it happen. Because storms don't rush. They build. The order hung in the air. Detain her. It hadn't been written yet, but everyone in the lobby felt the invisible paperwork already stamping across Amara's future. The intake clerk slid a clipboard closer, eyes flicking between her and the sergeant like a referee waiting for the whistle. An officer near the vending machine cracked his knuckles, as if ready to play enforcer. Even the humming copier in the corner seemed to drag, as though the whole room was leaning toward the same conclusion. But Amara didn't move. Instead, she shifted the weight of her backpack and gently lowered the robotics trophy onto the counter. The motion was deliberate, unhurried. The bass tapped the laminate with a dull note, muted but resonant, like a gavel that belonged to her alone. She reached into her hoodie sleeve, pulled the fabric across her palm, and brushed away a line of rainwater dripping from the metal. A small gesture, quiet, but in the silence that followed, it felt seismic. "You're not listening," she said softly. "Run my name." Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. Calm has a way of amplifying itself. For a flicker of a second, the room stilled. Sergeant Hall's jaw shifted. Even O'Rourke paused, fingers drumming against the drawer where the phone lay locked. The smirk faltered just briefly, as if the weight of her composure unsettled him more than shouting ever could. He recovered quickly, leaning in. "You don't get to tell us procedure. This isn't a science fair. This is law enforcement." His voice pushed louder, meant for the officers watching. Meant to remind them who held the power here. Amara's eyes stayed level. Not defiant, not pleading, just steady, like a metronome keeping time while the room rushed off beat. Jules, from his corner, felt his throat tighten. He'd seen anger in this lobby before, voices raised, fists slammed, bodies dragged. But this wasn't that. This was something harder to dismiss. Dignity so unshakable it turned mockery into background noise. He found himself hovering over the keyboard, a finger grazing the function key that activated audit mode. He didn't press it yet. Not yet, but the temptation pulsed like a heartbeat. "Hall," O'Rourke prodded louder now. "What are we waiting for? Call juvenile. Get her processed." Hall's eyes narrowed at Amara. "Sit down." The command landed sharp, a soldier's bark. Amara didn't sit. She didn't flinch. She simply placed both hands on the counter, palms flat, fingertips brushing the damp edge of the trophy. "I'm not leaving," she said, her tone even. "Not until you run my name." The lobby thickened with tension. A couple waiting for forms in the corner glanced up from their seats. A Lyft driver who had wandered in to ask about a parking ticket stopped mid-step. All of them suddenly were witnesses. And in Amara's stillness, something shifted. The officers had expected fear. They had expected noise. Instead, they faced a quiet resistance that felt immovable, like a wall they hadn't prepared to climb. The rain outside tapped faintly against the glass doors. The precinct's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and in the middle of it all, a girl stood calm, silent, and absolutely unwilling to vanish. It was the kind of silence that unsettles, the kind that makes men in power wonder, just for a moment, what does she know that we don't? Silence pressed down heavy, the kind that doesn't soothe but suffocates. Every breath in the lobby seemed to echo, too loud, too sharp. The sergeant's command had stalled in the air, waiting for a reaction that never came. Then, a small shift. Jules, the IT intern tucked behind his console, adjusted his headset and slid his chair half an inch forward. The screens in front of him pulsed with rows of green icons, body cams live, timestamps scrolling. He wasn't supposed to interfere. Interns didn't interfere. But something about the way Amara stood there, calm and still, pushed against the edges of his silence. His cursor hovered over the command labeled audit mode. One keystroke and every second of audio, every word spoken in the last 10 minutes, would be locked into the oversight server, irrevocable, undeniable. His supervisor wasn't watching. The officers weren't paying him any mind. Jules's chest tightened. He didn't press it yet, but his finger trembled like it wanted to. At the entrance, the door opened with a wet squeak. A man in a driver's jacket stepped inside, shaking rain from his shoulders, Lyft decal on his sleeve. He carried the restless energy of someone who had been circling the block too long. As he waited by the counter for directions, his eyes caught the scene. The officers, the girl, the tension knotted in the air. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the camera. Instinct. In 2025, every public injustice came with a lens. But before he could press record, Amara turned slightly, her eyes meeting his. No hostility, no panic, just a quiet steadiness. Her lips moved, barely above a whisper, yet clear enough for him to hear. Words, not lenses. The phrase stopped him. His phone lowered a fraction. He frowned, unsure, then slid the device back into his pocket. Something in her tone carried weight, like she already knew there'd be proof, like she didn't need shaky video to defend her. The driver leaned against the wall instead, arms crossed, now more witness than bystander. Back at the counter, O'Rourke noticed none of this. He was still reveling in his own theater, leaning over the desk like a man basking in the spotlight. "Sergeant, you hear me? Kid won't comply. You want me to handle this?" His hand hovered too close to the trophy, as if itching to snatch it again. Hall exhaled through his nose, a slow flare of irritation. "We'll hold her until Juvenile arrives. Let's not make this more complicated." But the room was already more complicated. They just didn't see it yet. In the corner, Jules finally pressed the key. Audit mode engaged. The command flashed red across his monitor. Live oversight channel open. Every word in the lobby was now streaming to a secure server far outside this building. Jules's pulse hammered, but his face stayed neutral, the picture of an obedient intern. Amara didn't turn toward him, didn't acknowledge the driver who had put his phone away, but somehow she seemed to know, her shoulders squared. Her hands rested against the counter again, calm, deliberate. The storm was building quietly, invisibly, but now it had witnesses. And once witnesses awaken, silence can't be erased. The room had shifted. Not visibly, not enough for O'Rourke or Hall to notice, but something had cracked. Jules's quiet keystroke, the Lyft driver leaning against the wall, phone tucked away but eyes wide open, the silence that clung to Amara like armor. But power rarely senses its own fragility. Sergeant Hall straightened his shoulders, arms still crossed over his chest. His voice carried the weight of authority, clipped and cold. "She's not leaving. We hold her until Juvenile gets here. End of discussion." The intake clerk scribbled notes without lifting his head. An officer at the vending machine muttered, "Figures." The sound of the soda can dropping into the tray punctuated the air, casual, dismissive, as if a girl's life could be reduced to background noise. Amara remained still. Her hands, flat against the counter, didn't tremble. The robotics trophy beside her gleamed faintly under the fluorescent light, scarred base catching shadows. Hall's gaze locked on her. "You'll sit down now." His tone left no space for question. Amara didn't sit. She met his stare, unblinking. "Run my name." The words, steady as before, hit the room like a nail driven into steel. O'Rourke barked a laugh, louder than necessary, eager to shatter the stillness. "Oh, this is precious. You hear that, Sarge? She wants us to run her name." He leaned across the desk until his face hovered just a foot from hers. His breath smelled faintly of coffee gone sour. "What's next, sweetheart? Want us to salute?" The officers behind him snickered. One shook his head, muttering, "Kids these days." But O'Rourke wasn't finished. His voice rose, carrying into the lobby like a performance staged for every pair of ears. "Your mom's special forces? What is she, some kind of influencer? Maybe doing push-up challenges on TikTok?" Laughter followed, cheap and jagged. It filled the air the way smoke fills a small room, thick, choking, hard to ignore. Amara stood motionless, letting it roll over her. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her silence made the ridicule sharper, like knives dulled against stone. The Lyft driver shifted uneasily, his arms crossed tighter. Jules's stomach twisted. He wanted to speak, to interrupt, to say something, anything. But his badge said intern. His voice, if it cracked now, might be the last he ever used in this building. So he stayed quiet. His finger tapped the desk instead, nervous rhythm betraying his calm facade. O'Rourke shook his head in mock pity. "You kids think you can walk in here, flash some fairy tale about your mom being Rambo, and what? We just hand back evidence? Get real." "How?" Hall gave a curt nod, sealing the performance with bureaucracy. "Enough. She's being detained. Mark it." The intake clerk scribbled faster. The vending machine officer cracked open his soda, carbonation fizzing like applause. And through it all, Amara stood steady. Every insult, every laugh, every bureaucratic stamp, they thought it buried her. In truth, it was stacking like kindling, and kindling only waits for fire. O'Rourke's smirk widened, the kind of grin that feeds off an audience. He straightened, then suddenly reached across the counter. Before Amara could shift, his hand closed around the robotics trophy. Metal scraped against laminate as he yanked it toward him, careless, deliberate. The base slammed against the desk's edge, leaving a sharp chip of paint curling away like a wound. The sound cracked through the lobby, louder than laughter, louder than soda cans fizzing open. Amara's eyes followed the trophy. Not his hand, not his sneer, just the scar now carved into the award she had carried through rain, sweat, and countless nights of soldering circuits under dim lamps. O'Rourke spun it in his grip, mocking appraisal. "This?" he said, holding it high so the clerks in the back could see. "She calls this robotics. Looks like something you'd find in a thrift store bin." The officers chuckled again. Even Hall allowed the corner of his mouth to twitch upward, as though disrespect had become policy. Amara's jaw tightened, but her body remained still. She didn't lunge for it, didn't plead. Her silence was more piercing than any protest. O'Rourke noticed, and it irritated him. He dropped the trophy back onto the counter with a deliberate crash, enough to make the chipped edge rattle against the wood. Then he pressed the intercom button, voice booming across the precinct speakers. "Juvenile officer to lobby. Possible theft. Possible obstruction. Detained for questioning." Hello. The words rang sterile and cold, yet heavy with intent. The kind of call that rewrites a narrative before truth ever has a chance. In the corner, Jules flinched. He stared at his screen, the red audit mode live banner pulsing, every word O'Rourke spoke locking into permanence. His throat worked, but no sound came. He pressed his palms flat to his thighs, as though grounding himself against the weight of what he was recording. The lift driver unfolded his arms, shifting his stance. He glanced toward the door, then back at Amara, his expression tightening. He had seen detentions spiral before, seen kids pulled into systems that never let them out clean. But Amara, she didn't move. Her palm still rested on the counter, fingertips brushing the damp edge where the rain from her hoodie had pooled minutes earlier. Her breath remained steady. Hall stepped closer now, looming presence casting a shadow over her. "Cooperate," he ordered. His voice, flat and rehearsed, sounded like paperwork spoken aloud. O'Rourke leaned sideways, whispering just loud enough for others to hear. "You don't belong here, never did." The words weren't just insult, they were eviction. An attempt to erase her from the room, from the narrative, from belonging itself. And yet, in the heavy silence that followed, Amara's eyes held firm, not wide with fear, not dimmed by humiliation, just steady, waiting. The chipped trophy glinted faintly under the harsh fluorescent light. The scar in its base caught the glow, turning damage into a mark of defiance. They thought they had broken something. In truth, they had only carved the opening note of their undoing. The echo of O'Rourke's call still rang across the lobby speakers, sterile and heavy, when Amara finally moved. Not a flinch, not retreat, just the faintest shift of her wrist. Her fingers brushed the face of her watch, a simple matte band smeared with rain. To anyone else, it looked like a nervous tick, but her touch was precise, intentional. She whispered 2 words, so soft they barely disturbed the charged silence. "Nia, Protocol Gray." For a heartbeat, nothing changed. The officers smirked, certain they had caged her. O'Rourke leaned back, arms folded, trophy scar gleaming on the counter as if mocking her restraint. Hall exhaled, ready to stamp the moment into procedure. But at the far corner console, Jules's monitor flickered. Lines of text scrolled across the screen, slicing through his regular feed of body cam footage. Oversight channel. Live. Audit override engaged. His breath caught. He hadn't pressed anything. This wasn't him. The system had been triggered remotely, locked beyond his clearance level. He watched in stunned silence as the interface transformed every word spoken in the lobby transcribed in real time, tagged with officer ID, badge number, and timestamp. The red banner pulsed like a warning siren only he could see. Jules darted a glance at Amara. She hadn't moved again, still as stone, palms flat against the counter. But he understood now this wasn't a nervous tick. This was activation. The lift driver noticed the whisper too. He frowned, leaning slightly forward, trying to catch her words. He didn't know what Protocol Gray meant, but something in the girl's calm unsettled him. Like she'd just opened a door the officers couldn't see. O'Rourke, oblivious, chuckled. "What was that? Talking to your imaginary special forces, mommy?" He leaned closer, mocking. "Gonna call her in to save you?" Hall grunted in agreement, already scribbling notes for the juvenile file. His pen scratched against the clipboard with the finality of a locked gate. But Jules saw the truth. The system wasn't theirs anymore. It was hers. His pulse hammered as the live transcription captured O'Rourke's taunts word for word. "Imaginary Special Forces, mommy." Next to it, a timestamp sealed the insult into permanence. No editing, no deletion. This was evidence, immutable and already off-site. Jules swallowed hard. For the first time since starting this internship, he realized the power wasn't with the officers who filled the lobby. It was with the quiet girl standing across the counter, hoodie damp, trophy scarred, eyes steady. Amara's gaze never left the men in front of her. But her silence carried weight now, heavier than before. Because she wasn't just enduring their mockery, she was recording it, amplifying it, locking it in place like chains around their own wrists. The lobby hadn't shifted yet. Not to them. They still thought they were winning. But to Jules and to anyone who would soon see this stream, the balance had already tipped. They just didn't know they were standing on the edge of their own undoing. The lobby door groaned open, and for a moment the rain outside seemed to hush. Dr. Maya Cross stepped through. She didn't rush, didn't storm, didn't need to. Her presence carried its own gravity. A long, dark coat dripped with rain, shoulders squared beneath its weight. A lanyard swung against her chest, not gaudy but unmistakable. Special Forces, Redder Clace, on one side, CEO, Aegis Dynamics on the other. Every fluorescent bulb seemed harsher against her frame, as if the room itself wanted to sharpen her edges. Conversations faltered. Pens stopped scratching. Even the vending machine hum stuttered into silence. Hall blinked, confusion flashing across his face before habit pulled it back into a mask. "Ma'am, this is restricted." Maya's gaze cut through him like a scalpel. Calm, precise, deadly without volume. "You've detained my daughter without probable cause, and you've just triggered a live oversight channel. Every word you've spoken is already archived." Hall froze. His pen slipped slightly against the clipboard. O'Rourke leaned forward, smirk still plastered like armor. "This your Special Forces, Mom? Cute entrance. Gonna flash a badge and scare us off." But his confidence faltered as Maya stepped closer, pulling a folded document from the inside of her coat. She placed it flat on the counter, right beside the scarred trophy. The paper bore the seal of the city and the crest of Internal Affairs. "Vendor audit authorization," she said evenly. "Signed and active. It gives me authority to suspend precinct access if system abuse or bias is detected." Her words weren't loud, but they reverberated like steel striking stone. Jules's screen confirmed it. Audit escalation detected. Vendor authority override. His breath hitched. He glanced at Maya, then at Amara, realization dawning this wasn't improvisation. This was strategy. The Lyft driver muttered under his breath, "Oh, damn," and shifted his stance, suddenly aware he was witnessing something historic. O'Rourke tried to laugh again, but it came out brittle. "Vendor authority? Lady, this is a police precinct. You think a piece of paper." "Not paper," Maya cut in, her tone flat as a blade. "Protocol. Binding. Activated." The trophy glinted between them, scarred base catching the light like a scar that had turned into a signature. Hall stepped back now, unease crawling across his features. His authority, once unquestioned, felt smaller in her shadow. Maya didn't gloat, didn't rush. She simply looked at her daughter, her voice softening by degrees. "You don't need to fight them with noise, Amara. You hold still. You let the system show itself." Then she turned back to the room, her words steady, measured, impossible to ignore. "You mocked my child for invoking Special Forces. You mocked her for invoking me. Now, gentlemen, ask yourselves who really doesn't belong here." The fluorescent lights hummed louder, as though the building itself was listening. The lobby that had roared with laughter only minutes before now vibrated with something else, confusion laced with fear. Jules's monitor lit up like a siren. The red banner that had read audit mode. Live shifted into flashing text. Escalation confirmed. External oversight active. His heart slammed against his ribs. Every insult, every order, every word O'Rourke had spat was no longer just logged. It was streaming to Internal Affairs, real time. He raised his eyes, unable to hide it now. "They see everything," he whispered, voice cracking despite himself. Hall turned sharply. "What did you say?" Jules swallowed. His throat felt sandpaper dry, but the words tumbled out anyway. "It's not just recording. Internal Affairs is online, right now." As if to punctuate his confession, the desk phone shrilled a sharp, jarring ring that cut through the lobby like an alarm. Every head turned. The intake clerk hesitated before picking up, his knuckles white around the receiver. Silence stretched, then his voice tight and trembling. "Yes, sir. They're here." He looked at Hall, eyes wide. "It's internal affairs. They're on the line." The officers who had laughed earlier shifted uncomfortably. One set his soda can down untouched. Another suddenly found the floor tiles very interesting. Authority, once solid, was leaking like water from a cracked pipe. O'Rourke tried to bark over the moment. "Oh, come on, IA doesn't care about some kid mouthing off." But his voice faltered when he saw Jules's screen reflected in the glossy counter. Line after line of transcripts scrolled, cold and undeniable. Imaginary Special Forces, mommy. Officer O'Rourke, 14 hours, 37 minutes, and 12 seconds. Kids like you don't just stumble across iPhones. Sergeant Hall, 14 hours, 36 minutes, and 45 seconds. Each word shackled to a timestamp, sealed in permanence. A cough broke the tension. The lift driver pushed off the wall, arms crossed tighter now. His voice carried just enough for others to hear. "Y'all don't realize, this is bigger than a phone." For the first time, someone clapped. Just once, two hands striking together in the corner of the lobby. A middle-aged woman waiting for paperwork. She looked straight at Amara as she did it. One clap became two, then three. The sound was small, hesitant, but it cracked the silence. Another joined in, a man with a folder tucked under his arm. His clap was firmer, sharper. Soon the sound spread in uneven ripples, awkward at first, then gathering momentum, not applause for entertainment, but recognition. Resistance breaking the surface. O'Rourke's face flushed crimson. "Enough!" he snapped, slamming his palm against the counter. The trophy rattled from the impact, its scarred base catching the light again like a silent witness. Maya didn't flinch. She stepped closer, her voice calm but cutting. "Every second you speak, you write your own report." The phone at the desk clicked back into its cradle. The intake clerk's hand trembled as he set it down. "Internal Affairs wants full access," he said quietly. "Effective immediately." Hall's eyes flicked between Amara, Maya, and the blinking monitors. His authority, once iron, felt like sand slipping through his grip. The lobby wasn't theirs anymore, it was hers. The clapping faded into silence, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was heavier, charged, like air thickened before a storm breaks. Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She set both hands on the counter, steady, commanding, and spoke with precision. "Suspend access." 2 words. No more. The effect was instant. O'Rourke's badge, clipped proud to his vest, blinked green once, then stuttered into a sharp, pulsing red. A hollow tone chimed from his radio, flat and merciless. Ascesis revoked. Hall's badge followed a second later, the same red glow bleeding across the lobby like an infection. His tablet buzzed in his hands, screen flashing, credential locked. The clipboard nearly slipped from his grasp as he stared at the device that no longer obeyed him. The room froze. Officers shifted, confused, unsettled. The power they wore on their belts, their chests, their very identities suddenly dimmed, like a stage light snuffed out mid-performance. On Jules's monitor, the change was clear. User O'Rourke suspended. User Hall suspended. Their body cam feeds blinked, then locked with a message. Hard transfer. Oversight server. Non-editable. Every insult, every order, every second they were sealed. Beyond recall. O'Rourke slapped at his badge like it was broken. "What the hell is this?" His voice cracked, no longer smug, now desperate. "You can't." Maya's eyes cut to him, calm and merciless. "I already have." Hall tried to recover authority, but his voice faltered. "This precinct doesn't answer to contractors." "This isn't contracting," Maya interrupted. Her tone sliced through the air like a blade. "This is compliance. You violated procedure, and the system responded. IA is watching. Your access remains revoked until their review is complete." The lift driver exhaled low, shaking his head. "Damn." She flipped the whole room. The middle-aged woman who'd clapped earlier murmured, "About time somebody did." Across the counter, the trophy still sat, scar glinting. Maya reached for it, not snatching, not rushing, just lifting it as though it were evidence itself. She wiped the chipped edge with her sleeve, then placed it gently back in front of her daughter. "Yours," she said softly. Amara curled her fingers around it. The metal felt heavier than before, but not from the damage, from meaning, from survival. O'Rourke's face flushed as he sputtered. "You..." You can't just walk in here and strip us like criminals. Maya turned to him fully now, her voice so even it was almost quiet. Number, I didn't strip you. You did that yourself. All I did was lock the evidence. The weight of her words pressed harder than any shout. The officers behind him shifted again, no longer laughing, no longer sure where to stand. For the first time, O'Rourke looked smaller. Not because he had shrunk, but because the room had shifted its scale around him. The lobby held its breath. O'Rourke's badge still blinked red, pulsing like a wound. Hall's tablet sat frozen in his hands, useless now, a mirror of his silence. The power they'd worn so carelessly minutes ago was gone, suspended, stripped, undeniable. Maya turned, not to them, but to her daughter. Her voice softened, stripped of steel but not of strength. You don't need to raise your voice, Amara. You raise the standard. The words landed like an anchor, steadying the storm around them. Amara's fingers tightened on the trophy, the scar in its base catching the fluorescent light. For the first time, her breath came easier. She hadn't needed to fight. She had only needed to stand. Then Maya lifted her eyes to the corner of the lobby, where a black dome camera blinked its tiny red light, the system she herself had built. Her tone sharpened, not loud but cutting through the air like a blade. You mocked special forces as if it were a joke. You mocked my child as if her dignity could be erased. I don't need footage to prove this. A pause. The silence deepened. I am the protocol that ends it. The room trembled in that quiet. No one spoke. No one laughed. Even the fluorescent hum seemed to bow its head. Amara slung her backpack over one shoulder, trophy in hand, and walked toward the door. Rain tapped against the glass, lighter now, almost gentle. Behind them, the precinct remained frozen, 2 officers locked in red, a lobby full of witnesses, and a silence too heavy to escape. Justice hadn't shouted. It had simply stood.